All right, so wish you a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to start our weekly program called Sales Ki Pathshala. The topic today is the power of listening. Yes, friends, today we are going to talk on this power of listening. If you are a sales professional, then it's a very, very, very important power of listening. In fact, we have coined the name of the topic today as why do we have 2 ears and one mouth? Why do we have 2 ears and one mouth? Because we can listen more and talk less, right? So even God decided that we should have 2 ears and one mouth because he wanted us to listen more and talk less. But unfortunately, most of us, or rather many of us, talk more and listen less. So hence the context of today's program is the power of listening. Now, in this scenario of power of listening, I want to start with this very interesting story. There is this jungle, and in the middle of this jungle, there is this huge, humongous tree which is falling down. Now, I'm sure when this huge tree falls down in the jungle, it makes a lot of noise. But the question that I'm trying to raise here is that when this huge tree falls inside a jungle, does it make a noise? And I'm sure some of you would feel that, yes, of course, it will make a noise. And some of you will feel that, okay, I don't know because I was not there. Well, according to the laws of physics, surely there will be noise. But then the concept of noise is related to listening. If there is someone in the jungle to listen to the noise, we will say that, yes, there was a noise. If there is no one to listen to it, then how the hell do you say that there was a noise? And that is what we want to explain in this context of today's program, that you cannot communicate if you do not have a listener. So it's very, very important that if you're communicating, you should have a listening pair of ears. Just like this tree which falls down inside a jungle, if no one is there to listen, then there is no noise. So at the beginning of the program, I would like to talk about the difference between talking and listening. So it's very simple. It's a no-brainer. So when you are talking, you are actually sending out communication. And when you're listening, you're taking in communication, right? Now, the question is that if you're only talking, there is no problem. If you're only listening, there is no problem. But when you are talking and listening together, that's a huge problem, especially in the profession of selling. So don't ever do the process of talking and listening together. This is something like when you're talking to someone, a customer maybe, and even before the customer has finished his question, you are ready with your answer, which means that you are not listening to your customer fully. You're more interested in designing your answer. You're more interested in curating and preparing your answer rather than listening. So 100% listening or 100% talking is the name of the game. And if you have understood this, now we come to this million-dollar question, which says that how to listen. How exactly do you want to listen? Now, biologically, God has given us a pair of ears, which is programmed to listen to sound, listen to music, listen to what the customer is saying. But is that all the way that you can listen? Because through your ears, you can only listen to what the person is saying. But you cannot listen to what the person is not saying. And in fact, his communication becomes complete only when you combine what he is saying and what he is not saying. So by the time you have combined the two together, you can have a complete conversation. Because if the customer is saying that, Sanjay, your price is too high, but in his own mind, he's saying, Ki, right now, I don't need any new stocks. So let me play this game of low price with the salesperson. And maybe in the process, I'm able to negotiate a better deal with him. So now you see, if your ears have listened, They will only listen that Sanjay, your price is too high. But if along with your ears, your eyes are also listening, your brain is also listening, your entire biorhythm is also listening. So you will try to probe further by asking questions that, so why do you find my price high? Whom are you comparing my price with? What are your benchmarks of pricing? And what is your pricing per unit of solution that you get? And so on and so forth. You get what I mean? So if you believe only in your ears to listen, then maybe you will listen only the half truth, which the customer is trying to tell to you. What about the other half, which the customer is not trying to tell to you? And I'm sure you understand the importance of what I'm trying to say there. So here we would like to do this. When you listen, the other person may start listening to you. You see, typically what happens in a sales scenario, you are talking to a customer. So when the customer is talking, your mind is busy thinking about an answer. So you're not listening fully. When the seller is trying to talk, the buyer's mind is also thinking about ways and means of evading or avoiding this seller. So he's also not fully listening. Now, this is typically a scenario where both parties are listening only to answer and not listening enough to understand. And this is what leads to stalemates. This is what leads to stumbling blocks. This is what leads to no negotiation or walking out of the negotiation table. What is the problem? The problem is, first listen. So if you look at the word listen, there is a first hidden inside that word listen. It's the L first N, right? So you can see that the word listen itself camouflages the word first. Hence, it's important for us to first listen. Because when you start listening, there's a magic that happens. Your customer also starts listening to you. When you do not listen to your customers, you try to stop them midway. You try to tell them that you know better than them. You try to tell them that, look, they must listen to you. You will find that you're not getting a listening pair of ears at the other end. But you start listening, and the customer also starts listening to you. The customer starts opening up to you. Because you see, in a sales conversation, the customer will only open up to you if they start realizing that you will listen to them. As long as you are not showing any indication of listening to them, and you're only doing your blah, 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 and you're only doing your gapping sales talks and sales script, it doesn't work. So the customer also then goes inside a cocoon, and the customer doesn't want to open up. The customer doesn't want to come out of his shell, and nothing good happens for all of you. So first listen. First start listening to the customer. And now after the end of the program, we'll do some role plays with you, because right now my sound channels are blocked. When we do the role plays, you'll understand the importance of first listening to the customer that you're talking to. Having said that, I want to raise this question. Why do you want to listen? Why? What is the importance of listening? So if you understand the importance of listening, only then probably you will listen. So if you look at the basic tenets of listening, when you start listening to your customer, you actually start understanding your customer much better. And you will find that you are able to establish a connect with the customer. The customer is able to establish a connect with you. And unless these two things happen, you cannot take the customer from a no to a yes. So these are the three reasons that I want you to listen well. Reason number one, it helps you understand the customer. Reason number two, it helps you connect with the customer, or rather even the customer connecting with you. And it helps you getting to a yes into the whole discussion. Now, having said this, let me tell you a small story here. There was this client of mine, I don't want to take the name, and we were talking about this client, to this client. It was a huge project, and the client had this grudge, or rather this feeling in his mind, that he wanted to get this job done through a vendor who is known to him. Since we were not known vendors to him, so he kept on raising this issue of trust when dealing with us. Even though our product was proved to be good, our price was proven to be good, our service factors, our service terms and conditions, everything was good. But the customer kept on raising the point that he is too new to us and does not really know how to put all his eggs in this basket. Now, at this juncture, I made use of the power of listening. And I told to the customer that, sir, can you please tell me what is the worst that can happen if you deal with an unknown vendor? And don't worry, if you don't want to deal with me, will not deal with you, absolutely no issue. But let me understand, what are your worst fears? He was still reluctant to talk to me. And that's the time I told him that, sir, I'm sure that in the past, some incidents has happened with you, which is actually making you feel that you don't want to deal with new vendors. And he said that, yes, Sanjay, I had a very bad experience earlier. And I went ahead and said, sir, please tell me what really happened. What is the story? Because I will also learn from it. And I was using my power of listening there. And that's the time the customer started talking about a real estate broker. And his story went on like this, that there was this real estate broker who was very much from his family, some cousin brother related to him, who managed to sell him a plot of land. And then finally, in the process, after having paid the entire money, he realized that this plot of land did not have technically correct papers, to the extent that the possession of his land by him is still unreal, or it is still fictional as far as reality is concerned, because his papers are not up to the mark. Now, I listened to this whole story very carefully, which was being told by the customer. And I understood the fact there that the person who has actually duped him was a known person. He was a cousin brother of his. So when I told the customer that, sir, in this particular case, you have been duped by someone whom you knew. So anyone can actually dupe you, whether he's a known person or unknown person. The intentions of the vendor and the purpose of the vendor needs to be checked, rather than whether you already know the vendor or not. And when I said this after listening to his whole story, I could see a huge connect between myself and him. And then, to cut the long story short, finally we got to a yes after a series of couple of more meetings. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of listening. It helps you understand the customer better. It helps you connect with the customer, and it helps you taking the case from a no to a yes. Now, what's not said is actually the most cogent part of the communication. This includes feelings, this includes needs, and any salesperson who programs his mind to listen to what's not being said, but it comes forward in the form of feelings and needs, is a truly great salesperson. How do you do this? And why is it so difficult to listen? You see, mind is so cluttered. Mind has got so many things running on in your mind at a given point of time. There are a whole set of things which is to do with you. And then there are a whole lot of things which is to do with the prospect in front of whom you're sitting. And both these dyads come together in your mind, and it becomes a very complex portion of. So there's a lot of enthalpy in your mind. There's a lot of unstableness in your mind. And this is the reason that why you find it so difficult to listen. So as a sales practitioner myself, I always advise that you will always find listening very difficult as long as the story revolves around you. You see, there are two narratives in a conversation. One narrative is the buyer and the second narrative is the seller. Now, as long as you are listening to a conversation from your own perspective, you will always find listening very difficult. It's not about you, it's about him. It's not about the seller, it's about the buyer. So do not focus on yourself. You see, when the customer is saying that I don't need your product, you keep on asking yourself, oh, how will I tackle this? How will I prove to him that he needs my product? What should I do to ensure that I do business with this person? See, it's everywhere. I. Now, as long as your communication starts with an I, you cannot listen. So first and foremost, put the spotlight on the buyer and not on yourself. It's the buyer who is on the spotlight. It's the buyer you're trying to listen to, and it's the buyer you're trying to understand. Once you have put the spotlight on the buyer, then while listening, you do three things. You either agree with what the person is saying, or you disagree with what he's saying, or you prepare a response. I tell you that don't do any of these things. Three things. Don't try to agree. Don't try to disagree. Don't try to prepare a response when you are listening to the person. Instead, you should shift your focus to the person you're trying to listen to and move into his frame of reference. That's what I mean by putting the spotlight on the person. This is very important so that the clutter inside your own mind does not inhibit the listening process in you. And you are fully focused on the person you're trying to talk to. Now, many sales managers tell me that, Sanjay, if I spend so much time listening to the customer, he will throw me out of the call. He will think that I'm a very stupid salesperson, or he may think that I'm a no one. I do not know what is to be talked about. I do not probably know about my product, or I have no clue about what I'm selling. He might just write me off. Well, it doesn't happen like that. Don't believe that a customer talks to you because you can talk a lot. A customer talks to you because you're talking sense. The moment you start talking nonsense, the customer throws you out, either in a polite way or sometimes even in an impolite way. But important thing is, are you listening? Right? So do not, and that's a very strong caveat, do not try to respond to a customer even before he has not finished his communication. Do not be in a rush to prepare your answer even before it is time for you to answer. By doing that, you reduce your listening capabilities. Now, out of personal experience, I can tell you that when I had started here and when I had undergone these programs on listening, I always used to find it very funny early part of my life, because I used to say that, well, it's quite obvious what the customer is saying, and surely I am listening pretty well to the customer. So why make this whole hangama about active listening, active probing, and active talking and stuff like that? It took me some time to realize that you can only be a good listener when you learn how to listen to yourself. If you know how to listen to yourself, if you know how to listen to your own mind, you listen to your own heartbeat, listen to the flow of blood inside your own veins, listen to what your brain is trying to talk to you. And all this comes a lot through meditation and self-assessment. But then whichever method you take, you have to first learn how to listen to yourself. So talk to self before going for an important sales negotiation or even a sales call. Be clear about your frame of reference. So be clear as to what you want, what are your goals from the call, what are your milestones of the call, what exactly do you want to achieve in the next call that you're going for, what if you do not achieve your goal post, what if you achieve your goal post, and so on and so forth. That's listening to yourself. Some people call it planning, some people call it pre-sales call planning. I call it listening to yourself before you go for a call. If you listen to yourself crystal clear, and if you know very well as to what you want, I'm sure by the time you have reached the customer, you will also be able to know what the customer wants. And that's where you make a great salesperson. So if you want to listen, first listen to yourself. First, talk to yourself, listen to yourself, visualize as to what is there in your own brain. It makes a lot of sense to write down on a piece of paper as to what is there in your mind. We call it mind mapping, and there are a lot of softwares available, free tools which helps you in constructing a mind mapping. So create a mind map, listen to yourself very well, and then go for a sales call, then go for a sales negotiation, and bingo, you will find that the world is a different place to live in, and sales is a different kind of profession for you to handle. So be clear about your own frame of reference is what I want to end the session with. So communication for me is a process of listening, questioning, listening. You listen, then based on whatever you have listened, ask a question to yourself or maybe the client. Then based on what he's answering, again listen. And it's a loop. It's a loop of listening, questioning, listening, listening, questioning, listening. Let this loop repeat itself as many times as possible before you arrive at a clarity of what exactly the customer is trying to communicate. And here I want to talk with all of you about this huge power of listening. This entire power of listening is based on some aspect of NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. So NLP suggests that the condition of your brain decides the outcome that your brain gives. So if your brain is angry, you will always take angry decisions. If your brain is calm and quiet, you're always going to take peaceful decisions. So you must have read about so many sages and priests, gurus, yoga gurus in Hindu society or in your respective society or culture, where they always used to be very shant, very calm and quiet, but very strong in listening, very strong in listening. Okay. And they will not listen only from their ears, but they listen from their ears, from their eyes, from their mouth, from their brain, everywhere, whichever organ of the body they'll use to listen to the person on the other side. Because if you listen to the person on the other side, you have understood him better. And once you have understood the person better, there's no other better way of taking it forward and understanding the customer well. So on that count, ladies and gentlemen, I bring an end to today's program. My very best to all of you. This particular program is inspired by the presentation in a TEDx show by Mr. William Ury, who's the author of 2 bestsellers on negotiation, Getting to Yes by William Ury and Roger Fisher, and Don't Say Yes When You Want to Say No by William Ury. I request all of you to read these 2 books if you are into sales, because they give you superb insight into this entire process of listening and the entire process of negotiation. I wish and pray that this is helpful for you. Next time you sit on the negotiation table, you use the power of listening to win the game. Thank you very much. I'm now opening the lines for you so that you can open your sound box and your video, and we can take your question and answers live.